I read recently that modern liberals have no working theory of authoritarianism, of its causes, of its spark, or its fuel. I'm not sure that this is true, and I'll return to this a bit later in the article. But first, I want to return to my visit to Colombia a few months ago. I gave a couple of talks there, both on the theme of how open education can change the world. But perhaps more significantly, I participated in a couple of panels. One of them was recorded and I'll post it at some point, but the other one, the recording failed, unfortunately. And it's this second panel that I want to address. It included some statements, some powerful statements about some victims of violence during the Colombian War. And we from Canada were asked to respond from the perspective of open education. Now, there's no easy way to respond, and clearly I can't speak authoritatively about peace in Colombia. But I can talk about what peace means to me, and I can relate to what I was hearing from the statements that day, and that's what I did. And I wanted to make sure that I don't lose those thoughts, because what peace means to me is the working theory of what authoritarianism does to a people, why it's wrong, and why and how we should respond. So what I said is that peace means to me four things: security, identity, voice, and opportunity. The first thing they take away from you is your sense of security. This doesn't mean necessarily that they are attacking you directly. In fact, more often they don't. But what they want you to feel is that you're in danger of being attacked at any moment. We've seen this through history under many guises and under many names. The direct threat of violence is the most brutal and the least effective. The threat against your property, your business, or those you love is more common. The threat that some other will inflict this violence is the most subtle, but the outcome is always the same. You do not feel secure, and hence you feel compelled to reply, to comply. We are told that the only response is to arm ourselves, to be prepared to be violent ourselves, and to participate in the common defense. I don't think these are especially effective, especially if the defense force becomes as dangerous as the threat. They are not effective because they don't address the feeling of danger. If we carry weapons, our own weapons become a constant reminder that we are in danger. If we arm ourselves, that is proof that we're not secure. The only response, I think, is to remove the effectiveness of violence. Each time we comply with the demands of an aggressor, we make violence more effective. So we have to make it easier to refuse to comply. We have to make it possible and safe to report the threat. The solidarity of and trust in a community is the only effective response. The community must exist to protect the people. If one person is threatened, they should be able to stand behind the other members of the community. So the community protects that individual or the other individual, any individual that becomes threatened. In Canada, we have campaigns that encourage people, especially children, to seek help and, if necessary, speak out. They need to be able to report abuse or bullying and be protected. The same protections need to apply to women and to people who are vulnerable. We all need to be able to communicate our need to various social agencies, to police, fire services, health services, legal aid, education, housing authorities, workplace rights, safety, welfare agencies, and have the expectation of support without a fear of penalty. And this means we need to ensure that every person is aware of these services and is able to communicate with them and understands that they are trustworthy. The first thing the authoritarians and the violent do is to undermine trust in these basic community services. People who are undermining any of these, peace, healthcare, education, are undermining peace. The second item was identity. And identity is the right to define and be who you are. By contrast, war reduces each and every one of us to one thing, a tool of one side or another fighting the war. We are no longer seen as individuals. We are seen as instruments, as weapons. The depravity of this becomes evident if you read A Long Way Gone or watch Blood Diamond. You see how war creates child soldiers. No army is innocent. In war, entire societies are mobilized. People become kamikazes or suicide bombers or make heroic sacrifices. You're either supporting the war effort or you're a traitor. You're asked to do the unthinkable and then to do it again. More generally, conformity becomes the order of the day. People are expected to dress in certain ways, to speak in certain ways or in certain languages, to believe the same things, support the same religions. Obedience is demanded and expected. If a people is at peace, there's no need for order and conformity, and no sense that diversity and distinctness of identity poses a threat or a danger to society as a whole. And from the perspective of the individual, there is no peace unless there is freedom to establish and live one's own identity. Importantly, though, identity isn't just the right to say yes, it's also the right to say no. No, I will not be this. No, I will not say that. In Canada, we have a good, though not perfect, right to express our own identity. We can, for the most part, dress as we please, speak in what language we prefer, follow any religion or none, to work for or against the stated policies of the state, to support the government or the opposition. And we have a professional civil service, which means that any member of society, whatever their identity, may be a teacher, may be a police officer, or a legislator, and that any member of society, no matter what their identity, will be treated fairly by that civil service. But we've also learned through our failures that we need to attend to the needs of the most vulnerable. We have historically discriminated against Indigenous peoples and must engage in a process of reconciliation. We need to do more to assist those who are vulnerable through lack of ability or wealth or of education. And we need to extend the ways we recognize the right to a different identity, to fully protect those of various sexual orientations and of various religions. The people who deny us our individual identities, who tell us what to wear, what to believe, what language to speak, are people who are endangering the peace. War requires conformity, and war requires an enemy. It requires uniforms and scapegoats. We have to teach people to respect, honor, and value the individuality of each person as a good in itself, and as a good that ensures that each of us has the right to our own identity. Looking at voice. Voice is part of the expression of identity, but voice is also the way we create community, develop ideas, create future visions and possibilities. It is the possibility to create and also to speculate and also to celebrate. In war, there is no voice. Indeed, Loose lips shank sips. In war, the right to community and association is subservient, as is everything else, to the needs of the struggle and the power of the generals. In war, the only voice is the official voice. Voice is the right to a say. Voice means not only the capacity of expression, but the expectation that this expression will have an impact that can be and is measured and weighed. It is not merely the right to be consulted, but also the right to constitute a part of the governance, and especially self-governance, in the community. We think of democracy as an instance of voice. Each person gets a voice, each person gets a vote, and so each person is a part of the constitution of a government. But democracy can be a sham if only some parties are allowed to run, or if only some platforms are acceptable. There needs to be an open debate of ideas and the possibility that people, through communication or association, can organize themselves. It's not simply about whether they have a vote. In fact, that's the least important part of it. It's about whether they have a voice. The violence and authoritarian create a climate not only of violence and fear, but also of silence. The possibility of a voice is an affront. Outsider organizations are not permitted. And in some cases, they suppress labor unions. In other cases, they suppress religions. Secret cabals, however, and conspiracies proliferate and battle against each other. Militias and paramilitaries form, ostensibly to support the state, but in actuality to perpetuate the war. To have a voice, people must learn to have a voice. They must learn to self-organize, to make decisions, and resolve disputes in an open and peaceful manner. To create forums and newspapers and assemblies, to have community groups and societies and special interest groups. In Canada, we see a thick network of different types of groups, but underlying this is a system of education that teaches how to operate this way. The people who undermine voice, who say that some people shouldn't have a say, who seek to permit only some but not other organizations, who argue against due process or the right to be heard or to have a hearing, these people are undermining peace. Finally, we look at opportunity. And we each of us want to accomplish something in life. That desire might be very simple. Homer Simpson is happy if he can watch bowling on TV while eating pork rinds. While for others it may be very aspirational. Help the poor, cure the sick, settle on Mars. Some of us want to earn money, some of us want to travel, some of us want to achieve inner peace. It all matters. None of it's better than the other. By opportunity, what we mean is that there is a path, or at least the potential of a path, to get you from where you are to what you aspire to achieve. It means that opportunity is something possessed not only by the rich and powerful, or by the properly colored, or by the right religion or caste, etc., but by everyone in society. Those who do not have opportunity are not at peace. Those who deny opportunity are waging war against them. Opportunity is not a guarantee. Nobody pretends it's a guarantee. What we want to achieve may require an effort we cannot spend, an ability we do not have, time we cannot commit, strength we do not possess. What opportunity means is that we as a society do not impose any barriers between ourselves and our ambitions. War takes away opportunity. Personal ambition becomes secondary to the needs of the conflict. What one will do or achieve in life is to a large degree decided. Often in war, there are privileges awarded to some segment of society and denied to another, as a means of creating order through the creation of a ruling class. War often takes away opportunity through the destruction of any means to an opportunity. Schools, houses, businesses, roads, whatever, are closed and destroyed. In a society at war, in an authoritarian society, your ambitions are meaningless. It wasn't simply his business struggles that prompted Mohammed Bouazizi to set himself on fire in Tunisia to launch the Arab Spring. It was the indifference that the authoritarian state had to his life and to his aspirations. Opportunity, especially for those in marginalized or vulnerable groups, requires support. It requires the protections of the state. And it requires the possibility to govern oneself and to be seen and heard by others. But it requires more as well. It requires a commercial infrastructure that is robust and trustworthy. It requires the right to freely transport and exchange goods. And it requires the training and support to help a person plan, implement, and achieve their objectives. In a society at war, currency is scarce or valueless, bribery and corruption are common, and the means to conduct trade and commerce are allocated on a preferential basis to friends and family. A person denied opportunities by that fact denied peace, and those who undermine opportunity undermine peace. So, all this is basically what I said at the panel. And more importantly, what I said was that I heard them say these things themselves when they described their experience in war. I heard them say they lost their security. They lost their security when they were coerced and abused, when their family members were killed, and when they themselves were tortured, and that they were compelled to comply with the unthinkable. I heard them say they lost their identity, that they could not be members of indigenous groups or even live as children or women, but they were simply used by the factions at war. I learned how they had no control over the governance of their town, of their community, or their lives, how even then there were election candidates who would be killed or simply disappear. And I heard how they had no future in the war, no way to earn a living. I told them I heard this. I told them I would carry forward what I heard from them to the world. And this is me keeping that promise. So I mentioned the article above. And Umair Haque in that article says, it's poverty that drives people to despair. And poverty, genuinely speaking, not just of money, but the authentic kind in its many forms. Impoverishment of trust, of relationships, of communities, of belonging, of meaning, of purpose, of chances, of safety. When these things are taken away from people, as they have been for those abandoned and forgotten by globalization and neoliberalism, then of course they will flee to the arms of the nearest strongman. Now, Haque, the economist, speaks as poverty is the cause of war, but I see equally well that poverty is the result of war. All these forms of poverty are the result of warring factions or the authoritarians that produce them, taking not only security and wealth, but also meaning, purpose, and belonging. Haque writes, the key to defeating authoritarianism is rewriting social contracts, But simply writing contracts that will be ignored is not the key to security, identity, voice, or opportunity. Simply writing the contract might not do anything at all. There are many documents through history that have proclaimed those rights: religious texts, declarations and promises, manifestos. But they have all at the same time, at one time or another, been used as pretexts to extinguish the very rights they proclaim. The only path towards peace and freedom from authoritarianism is the path that leads toward the creation and maintenance of the civil society, the just society, the caring society. Peace requires caring for and supporting each of the things that are taken from us in a time of war. A civil and social infrastructure we can trust to protect us. A respect for and celebration of each other's distinct identity, and an ability for each of us to participate in governance and conflict resolution, and the right to the necessities of life and conditions enabling each of us to aspire toward achieving our goals. Now, I don't care what you call this, but if we understand these as what war and authoritarianism take away from us, we also understand that this is what it is that we are working toward. And we understand, or should understand, that we need to put down the tools of war and take up the implements of peace. As they say, beating our swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. What we can do, and what the authoritarians will never do, is not to fight, but to work and build something that is strong and endures, that they cannot destroy. I'm Stephen Downs, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.